A warm welcome back to Beyond the Norm podcast. I know I have been bold. I haven't been recording consistently. Well, deep down, for those that have been a while, know that I don't record weekly, but it is more when the themes and the right topics emerge from within me, as opposed to keeping to a schedule, unlike other podcasts. Beyond the Norm, there you go, living true to its name. So I hope you've been well. You have been listening in the droves. Thank you so much. I've been getting absolutely fabulous messages in the last few weeks, especially for the last kind of 4 podcasts. And there's been a few hundred of you that have listened, and I am absolutely chuffed, and lots of new followers as well. So you're all very welcome here. Today's episode is going to be around purpose and journeying with purpose, because purpose is a journey, not a destination. And I think when I recorded my podcast back in, it's nearly three and a half, if not 4 years ago soon, I would say that that was very much my idea of purpose back then, was probably that it was a destination versus it really is a journey. And so much has changed for me in those years that it was high time that I recorded an updated version of purpose and my views now, because I've since then become a systemic coach, and there's so much more to my learnings, and how I view life has changed. Not massively that you would all notice, but I notice. And I was really drawn to sharing kind of the updated version and where am I at with my purpose now, and also where are you at? Because you've changed an awful lot in 3 years. So sit in, go for your walk. This probably will be a long episode as I start to record this. I can tell already it's going to be a long one. So you might need it in a few sittings. My word of advice is don't listen to this if you're in bed. I've been told again and again, my voice puts people to sleep. It's not that I'm boring. I just have that hypnotic impact on people. So this is a podcast for the car or for a walk or while you're working, doing some deep work in the background maybe. It would be something nice to listen to, not something to go to sleep with. Not unless you need to sleep and then I am your voice that you need. But I know people who listen tend to have to go back to the start because they've missed some kind of key parts of this episode. As always, with if you listen on Spotify, you can go to specific chapters that might be more interesting for you. And equally, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the chapters as well. So you get to the parts that are relevant to you, because this is what this is all about. This is about me telling my story to show you that you're not alone, and there's lots of different ways that you can find your purpose, work with your purpose. But also I'm going to cover a little bit at the end around the shadow of purpose and where purpose can become a little bit sinister. It is Halloween after all. So stay tuned, enjoy this episode, and if you like it, please rate, review, share with people that you think it would help them. The wider this goes, the more useful I can be, and you'll hear all about that very soon. So, getting into the heart of my purpose journey, and it really is that purpose is never a straight path. I'll be sharing my own journey here of discovering my purpose, but also how my purpose has been transforming and what learnings have kind of shaped that. Because, we really are sold a bit of a lie that we should know our purpose and that we came here on this planet to, share our gift or walk this path. And I think this is a place of privilege. I'm going to say that as well. Like, to have purpose and know what it is something that we are really, really lucky that we can, many of us. Whereas there's many societies in the world and systems that it's all about survival, and purpose doesn't even enter it. But also I feel in the early part of our life, it's all about getting on that ladder. We often hear that how we have to start, and it doesn't matter what you do, you just need to start. This idea of just starting. And one of the biggest things that I have realized is that the clues to our purpose have started long, long before we think we've discovered it. And this weekend, I had one of those epiphanies that I really wasn't expecting. As many of you know who follow me on my Instagram stories know, of recent weeks I've had an organizational coach who was a former client who is now has supported me in the last few weeks to organize my apartment. My apartment is small and it needs to be highly functional to a lot of different roles. I live here, I work here, I spend a lot of time here. I also, when I have visitors, it needs to perform a lot of duties, and sometimes my systems were broken. So, as a projector, and I'll talk a little about that in human design. As a projector, I need to have systems in place. Once I have systems in place and I know where things belong, I can maintain that. But if I can't always be the expert to put the systems in place, so hence why I had the amazing Megan. I'll tag her here on the show notes as well, and you'll look back on my stories as well. You'll see her. She's amazing. And it was a great process really, because I had to let go a lot. I think her first day was just on my clothes alone. I think she left here with like 6 bags of charity, just clothes alone. And in that shedding and that letting go has been such a liberating process that I really was long overdue. But it has allowed me to move into shedding more and more. I still have a mini base in my father's place in Limerick, and this weekend I really there was a real calling, and my intuition told me that it was time to let go of letters. I was the pen pal queen. Remember pen pals? Remember that was a thing? I had pen pals in Germany and France, and everybody ever met in Irish college, and I was in Irish college 3 times, and I was on French exchanges. I just was, I don't know where I fitted in my study, because it looks like I was writing 3 and 4 letters every week. But it was something that my mother instilled in me. She was a great letter writer, as is my aunt who's still alive, Auntie Kay, who still sends me letters. So I had these stacks and stacks of letters. I've kept all the really precious ones, especially the ones from my mother. I even have a beautiful one from my brother. And really, yeah, just unexpected treasure trove of letters this weekend. But there was 1 or 2 letters that I really needed to get rid of, which were like teenage crushes. One that called me Stumpy. Imagine I used fancy a man that used to nickname me Stumpy. That's probably where it all went wrong. Maybe a signal to why I'm still single. And that's not true. Still single. I'm happily single. So it was time. But amongst all these letters were just that amazing treasure trove of school reports. Really unexpected. So in the treasure trove of school reports, I found this from, I think, 5th year. And religious education, of course, being a convent, was the first subject that's mentioned. And it was excellent student, coordinator of the meditation group, always achieves, or something like that. I was like, oh my God, I had totally and utterly forgotten that I used to coordinate the meditations, I think every week, myself and my friend Sandra, I think. And that was something that we did every week. And I I have a vague recollection of the rooms. I think it was Taizé was the prayer, which was it in its format, a meditation. The nuns were, because prayer is a form of meditation, excuse me, when it is that, like the convents were ahead of their time with the meditation, and myself and my friend were the main coordinators. So yeah, it's really lovely, because now when I'm in those rooms and I'm guiding people, especially on my retreats, and especially even I am doing an Instagram live tonight, a brief meditation, my breath work, it's like that was already there. That was there all along, and I didn't even see it. That has been part of my story much earlier than I thought I was. And I was that queen of, I need a certificate, I need this, I need that. But a lot of it was, I've been doing some of this stuff since 1996. So there you go. That was just an insight into the purpose from my early years. So I was journeying with purpose from a very young age. And I think in a way it was an adaptive strategy. And I talk about in my first podcast around purpose, this idea of being helpful, and that I was that, mama's good girl and I wanted to help her. And they were very much my early years that But it was an adaptive strategy to belong and to be loved, because if you care for somebody else, that's what my mother did, and that's what people do in our family. We look after other people, that I will be loved and belong, and that's an attachment. You look at Gabor Mate, like some of our purpose, in particular when coaches step into this work, there is that it's like, who are we trying to rescue in our families? And that is, something that every coach, every psychotherapist has to look at, and has to look at it and acknowledge, as opposed to dismissing that that's a part of us. But it really is something that we walk with when we are in this work. Nurses equally, doctors, there's a systemic lens to some of this stuff. What was in our family that we thought we needed to care for other people? And where it becomes a maladaptive strategy is this idea around rescue, because they must be broken and I need to fix them. And if I don't fix them, I can't save them, and I can't save myself. So there's a lot of deeper patterns going on in here that I probably didn't mention in the last podcast, whereas now I have a much deeper awareness of the origins of our need to belong and have impact when it comes to purpose, because this is all weaved in. And I see this as a journey down a river. And not always a river doesn't always flow with ease. It meets bumps along the way. There's trees are falling, and it picks up speed at points, and it slows down. And purpose and finding our purpose is very, very similar. So in my early life, the indicators that I wanted to help others was there. I was like that, that little girl that wanted to be good for the teacher, and actually that kind of backfired on me, because a primary school teacher, I would say, a mild form of dyslexia, and I never got anything right for her, so she used to get really angry at me. And I have lots of memories of being at the board not able to write an E because I used to do it backwards, and just little things like that stands out, that I think I used to compensate and go home and be an extra good girl for my mother, because I didn't think I was a good girl at school. And a lot of that stuff that I've worked through therapy, and I continue to attend to. It's my responsibility to attend to some of those early childhood themes around, being helpful and being good, and all of that comes with that. But on today's episode, what I'm really going to focus on some of my key milestones that brought me on that journey to purpose, and what were the things in my life that really opened up this world to me, where I knew that I had bigger work to do. I had more meaningful work to do, because there was much of my career I absolutely adored marketing. There was nothing around marketing that I didn't enjoy. I come from a two-parent family, and I have one father who's a salesman and a mother who was a stockbroker, right? We were a commercial family where money was important. I come from a background of entrepreneurs on both sides of my family. I know I've spoken about my grandfather, but equally my grandfather on my mum's side, but equally my grandfather on my father's side. And I have uncles that have real rich entrepreneurial backgrounds who love to make money, right? So I'm all of these things. I am not one or the other. And I think sometimes, people in our work, and especially because I would work in a somewhat spiritual field as well, wouldn't always have that commercial sense that I have, a really deep understanding of commerce, understanding of business. And it was the world that I worked in for 22 years as well. But I also understand the spiritual nature and the energetic nature as well. So, which makes me an interesting combination to be talking about purpose. So I hope it's hitting some of the themes that you can relate to. So the key milestones really for me within my purpose, and it's a story I've told before, but I know I have a lot of new listeners. So I'm going to briefly scratch the surface of some of these themes, because they're probably similar to yourself and will resonate with you. So at the age of 28 was that first real wake-up call, that the life I was living was not the life that would sustain me, would bring me to a place of happiness, would keep me well. And that all manifested as getting sick in the summer where I was 28. and it was 2007, and I had been studying by night, doing my master's, and I had been partying the night away and working really, really hard and traveling for work. It was a time of hedonism, I would say, where I love to party, I love to drink, I love my friends. I wasn't that long living in Dublin. I had been living in France. I had travelled. I'd lived in Cork. I had, a great old life. A lot of it I was running away from something that happened to me in the years previously, where a guy that I'd been with had ripped me off, had taken my credit card and had left me in a lot of debt. And it was a real sucker punch. Like, it was a real kick in the, wow, I trusted somebody, I was kind to him, and he just shat all over me, basically. And I was young and naive. I'd just come home from France, and there was this idea that all Irish men must be lovely compared to the French men. Because Ireland's so small, you'd find out who somebody is. And if they weren't nice, you'd find out, you'd know. When that's so not true. I think I just really was unlucky. My trusting nature really ended up just kind of backfiring me at a young age. So I left Cork in a bit of a haze, been feeling really low and feeling just doubting myself. How could this happen to me? How could I be, shackled with this debt, with the shame of being with somebody who was just so untrustworthy. And it wasn't just me. He had ripped off lots of different people at the same time, which you would think would give you some solace, because he was taking the piss out of businesses locally, and not just me. So bit of a Walter Mitty character, convinced himself that he was deep down was good. And yeah, so very, very hurtful time. And it was around that time that I used to have these mysterious kidney infections. And it wasn't, of course, kidney infections with endometriosis. It is a very long diagnosis. And on some level, I probably had it since I was 11. There was indications of it from a very young age. But any inflammatory diseases, stress would be such a big indicator. Shame, guilt, anger, hurt, sadness, all of those emotions that I wasn't able to express. I would have really shoved them down and really pushed them into the pit of my womb and into the seat of my creativity. And it was those years that I was like, okay, and work wasn't really working out. I was kind of between different roles, and I really was driving all over the country. I was in sales. I just wasn't happy. And it was the start of the boom. And all my friends happened to congregate in Dublin. We had been in Paris, many of us, and all roads kind of came back to Dublin. So I was like, okay, I've resisted Dublin for a little bit now, I should go. So I moved to Dublin, and I found a dream job. I was working for Nokia Mobile Phones. Things were good. Life was good. And then crash, boom, I was burning the candle at both ends, and really, really, really going hard at, trying to do it all. I thought I could do it all. I didn't understand wellness, even though I'd done a little bit of yoga, a little bit of time out in nature in Cork. I hadn't any of that in Dublin. It was, as I said, pure hedonism, and kind of finding myself again after the bruising of that guy stealing money from me, that I just had this release of, life is fun. I found this job that I absolutely adore in this brilliant team, and sure, might as well throw a master's by night in the mix. That was kind of the years where I got sick, and that those first few days in the hospital was such a big wake up call. An emergency surgery. I lost my right ovary, my right fallopian tube, and I had a man who I've shared before called the vet, who sat on my bedside table and told me that I wouldn't have children, or if I could have children, it would be through assisted fertility, and I wouldn't be having children naturally, and that I would probably have to have more surgeries in my life. And kind of this was my fate. And although my mother was a very caring person, she just struggled with compassion for herself, which she therefore struggled with some compassion for me. So would have said to me on the day, sure, look, it could have been a lot worse. You could have broken your leg. And we all know a broken leg heals. But for me, it was this sentence. I was just handed this sentence of, you can't have children. It was that like bold statement by this man that I really, really didn't like and really felt helpless. And in those first few months, I definitely, if somebody even mentioned the word purpose or anything that would have, hinted at that some good will come of this, I would have punched them in the face. So for those that are going through shit right now, conversations on purpose isn't always useful because you're in the shit. You're in the cold bucket of shit and things are really tough and nothing is going your way. And it's a very lonely place. When I had that big surgery, I went home to my parents and I was barely able to walk. I couldn't tie my shoelaces. It was a double cesarean. It was not a keyhole surgery. It was emergency surgery. And I couldn't walk, couldn't drive, couldn't. I was helpless. Like my mother was washing me. I was probably one step away from having nappies. I didn't, thank God. But it was, yeah, I was on oxygen for a week. I was in not quite ICU, but step down care. It was a big wake up call, and just this lasting legacy of you can't have children, and just not being really angry with that man, really angry that how dare he? I will show him. I will prove him wrong. But I had a real strong determination, and I also realized, shit, I actually need to start caring for myself. I can't keep going, pushing through and not caring for myself. My body had its own alarm system. And also at the time, I didn't realize it, but, I really needed a lot of healing and support and love after, the breakup. And the breakup with this man who left me with this debt. And it was more than a breakup. It was just somebody had really, really deceived me and really hurt me and really shaken my core of who I was, and that I didn't trust myself anymore with men. I didn't trust myself with money. There was all of those themes were emerging there, but I wasn't ready to look at them because I was physically so unwell. So that prompted me, I suppose, into this. I was getting into the river at this stage. This is where I started to journey with purpose. So my mother was a big yoga convert. She had been doing yoga at this stage, probably 20 years of yoga. So I was finding myself back to yoga. I'd done a little bit of it in Cork before I left. And I was like, oh, this is really calming. This is what I need. This will build up my strength. Then I started going on kind of wellness holidays, yoga holidays, I would say. And because there was just like-minded beautiful souls on those yoga retreats, I started to meet people who were into energy work, and they started giving me names of people who were into Reiki, and I started kind of looking into how maybe there's something bigger going on than just me. I would always have said I had faith. I probably hadn't, by then I didn't have such a strong belief in the Catholic Church, but I would have still had faith. I had lost an aunt in the years before and an uncle. And, by the nature of, I know I've spoken about before, the loss of my sister when she was born. I believed in guardian angels. I believed that there was something greater out there, but I really I wasn't close to anything more meaningful than work. Work was, if you work hard, you earn. I didn't really understand energy or anything like that at that stage. Not knowingly anyway. Maybe subconsciously I might have. But I found myself into these kind of groups between Reiki, yoga, and the start of meditation. And then I stumbled into an NLP course. Don't ask me where I found it or who had told me about it. I think I'd heard that Google were really big into this theory in business around NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And it was probably 3 years after getting sick. So it was early 30s by now. And it was the first time I stepped into that room with the lovable and crazy Brian Colbert, who is the man behind the Irish organisation of NLP. And he just was this like, oh wow, my thoughts are my reality. And how, yeah, he had hypnotism was involved in some of his work. He has a program called The Happiness Habit. And it was just this like, oh wow, how I hold myself, how I am in my manner is indicative of how I'm feeling and how the world sees me. So there was all of that going on that I was like, wow, okay, wow, there's something bigger, deeper. What is this? And you could put it under a wellness umbrella, but it wasn't even traditional wellness or any form of wellness back then. You're talking 13, 14 years ago. Um, but it was a real like wake up call of, I need this. This needs to be part of my life. Acupuncture was also starting to feature. I had to have an awful lot more surgeries after that, but these were the things that were starting to resource me, and I really found people that I really enjoyed that were different from anybody I was working with, whether they were yoga teachers or guides or inverted commas coaches. They might have been called that as such, Reiki people, but the people that I was meeting at those courses were fascinating. And they all had stories, and they were authentic and vulnerable, and this whole other world started to open up for me in those years. Um, and I continued to journey with all of that. And for every, surgery I had, and I went on and had another 3 more after that, I would say, in kind of relatively quick succession. So I would have had time out from work from each one. I was with a specialist at this stage, just trying to find all the physical things that would help me keep well. So both surgeries and hormonal therapies, as well as all this wellness space. So that included everything that I've just mentioned. Life was toddling along, I would say. And then I met this amazing woman. I have interviewed her here on this podcast, Sarah Lennon, and she was after finishing a coaching course, probably 2 years prior. And we met for lunch one day, and I was like, "Wow, this is really interesting." Um, and by then, and I suppose to backtrack a little, I had been with my ex on and off. There was a lot of on and offs in those years, where he didn't live in Dublin. We were friends 1 minute, next thing we were lovers, we were everything. And he at one stage even agreed that he would have a child with me if that was what I really wanted, because that's what I was doing. I was out to meet men that I could have a child with. I didn't even necessarily think I wanted to marry them, but I was definitely that my sole goal was having a baby, because this man told me I couldn't, and I wanted to give him a big 2 fingers to the man, because how dare he tell me I can't have a child? I will show him. So they were kind of my main goals, I would say. Like I said, purpose didn't even feature. It was like what I wanted, and I was going to have it no matter what, because I thought at that stage that everything was legacy was linked to having children. That's only the legacy that I would have seen in my family, that my mother would have said even her proudest thing that she ever did in her life was having us as children and becoming a mother, becoming a grandmother, that really kind of solidified her life. So I only saw legacy as, yeah, having offspring and, leaving your name and leaving all that behind. And I probably would have talked about legacy more than purpose back then, because I could understand legacy because that was something big in our family. I'm named after my grandmother. Her name was Nora, and I am Nora Mary Norma. So there's a legacy there. And because if I was told I couldn't have children, how could I have legacy? How could I have, the word as said, purpose hadn't even entered the conversation, but how could I pass part of me on? And that's this, and the part of me, I had that, if I think about it now, was that idea of I would take a part of me and give it to somebody else. Like I would take a chunk out of me. And that's what mothers do, that idea of like, I will pass my genes on and I will care for this child and children to become, some part of me. And, so if that was my sole goal, well, then I needed a man to get there. I wasn't ready to commit to having children on my own. And I knew on paper like I have a lot to offer. I have a lot to offer a man. So as a result, I stayed in the wrong relationships. No offense to those men. It was way more about me as usual. It's not you, it's me. But it was absolutely me. I was literally had this tight grip on this one thing because I was told I couldn't have it. And I also thought it was the one thing that I could latch onto. Because it's something my mother did, my grandmother did, my great grandmother did, my great grandmother did, and all the lines of strong women behind me who had children. And because children were survival, because you had children to make sure that they would care for you. And again, this idea that, as human beings, and you talk about Gabor Mate, we have attachment. We need attachment to survive. So this is a survival mechanism as well as a heart's desire, right? So I had two of those things. So when that relationship came to an end, which now I really, really am really grateful it did, because we were not meant to be together at all. And it ended quite abruptly and very hurtfully. And I discovered just after the breakup that I was pregnant. But it was a very early miscarriage. I'm talking very, very, very early. Like it was like within hours of thinking or knowing I was to losing. So there was never much attachment to the outcome of that I could have a child. There wasn't enough time to even, to get to grips with it. If anything, I was just mourning the breakup. I was devastated because it happened so abruptly and so unexpectedly that, if that was my only chance to become a mother, then, I couldn't allow any feelings around that because I was just so angry and hurt over the breakup. But the months that happened, and this was now, we're talking about 2017. Yeah, 2017 or so. So I'm by, late 30s by now, 38, 39. And I sat down and had this conversation with Sarah Lennon, and she was telling me all about coaching. And she had just, she 2 years prior, she'd become a life coach, a life and business coach. And I remember just sitting back going, oh my God, that's it. That is it. That's what I want to do. That's what I think I'm meant to do. That is it. And it was like this whole other world. And I was able to go after that. I still hadn't said no to becoming a mother. That goal was still in my peripheral vision, very much my North Star. But I also knew when Sarah talked about it and how she talked about it, she even said it has made me a better parent and I wouldn't be who I am today without it. All the language she used was just like, boom, that's it. That's what I want. I totally want to go and do that. So I registered to do that course that autumn. And it was in the middle of that course that my mother was given her cancer diagnosis. Excuse me. And it was those months and those milestones that we went through a really rocky journey for around 16 months with my mother. And I would let the college know each month whether I could finish the course or not. But I was so determined. That course shook me again to my core again. Was like I had to find out who I was and who I was in relation to helping other people. But I knew the day I walked into that course, that very, very first day, that this was it. This is the thing. This is the thing that I've been searching for but wasn't searching for, if you get me. That it was like, oh my God, these people are speaking my language. They're, learning to be more vulnerable, because at this point I might have been authentic and I might have been true to who I am, but I certainly wasn't opening up, or I wasn't able to cry in front of people or express any emotions, because I was still pushing them down as a way of survival, because I thought that's how it's done. We just suck it up, rules of belonging in our family. My mother's one was, cry alone, laugh and the world laughs with you. And that was a big one in our family. So crying was shameful and wrong and not a place, that you could really open up. So coaching kind of was the first one to really crack that, I suppose, caramel center of my heart open, to be like, oh fuck, I have to cry publicly. I need to do this. Not just for me. It's not about me. I was able to do it because I was framing it as I need to do this to be a better coach, because I want to be the best coach to the other person, because it was much more about helping them than being myself. So yet again, I was this emphasis on the external. Like, if I can help them, I'm a better person. If I can rescue them, I'm a better person. If I can fix them, makes me a better person. All this BS, belief systems bullshit, that sometimes as you know, and it's not always, because if you've good coach training, they'll call you up on the shit, which I lie. My coach company did absolutely. Is, yeah, you have to care for yourself before you can care for anybody else, but you are equally as important as the other. You're not more important, or you're not less important, you're as important. And I think as mothers, I see it all the time with my clients, I see it with my family, how, and I will never know what it is to become a mother. So I will never know. And I have a selfless gene as well to give, and a selfish gene. I am both of those things. But I will never know what it is within a mother that wants to already decide that her needs are not important, and it's only the needs of her children or husband or partner that is more important. And I will never know what that's like, but I have certainly been a witness to it, to the extent that I'm like, this might have worked for your mother, this might have worked for your grandmother, but we're in a different world now, and you need to care for yourself and care for your children. It's not either or. So I think seeing that now in others, it's really, really interesting. That I just some days be like, you have to care for yourself. Because because it's my path as well. I have to care for myself. So finding the coaching course, and I suppose, it wasn't the first time I had experienced the NLP coaching as well, but I just saw that was a better way to know me and better way to do my work as a marketeer, as a salesperson. But this one now was like, oh no, 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 this is life. Like, this is deeper. This is deeper work. And I liked the deeper work. The deeper, once I allowed myself to find my emotions, the deeper the work, the richer the experience was for the other person and for me. So I started to correlate that. Oh, okay. And I'd kind of shelved my Reiki at this stage as well. I'd kind of, again, put them in different boxes of like, oh, no, 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 the twain shan't meet. Because I was compartmentalizing, because I was learning. And that's what happens when we're learning. We're deep in the learning that we're not allowing this beautiful integration piece, the dance between who we are versus the action of coaching. And I think, even fast forwarding to 2024, I've done an awful lot of learning this year. 2025 is my integration year. I want to do the dance, and the dance will be, very much somatic, into my body, into nature, integrating all the beautiful learnings I've done this year in a way that is like, who have I evolved into now because of all these learnings? What is my work now? Who am I becoming? But yeah, when we're in the mix of the learning phase, that sometimes our identity is lost for a little bit, because we have valued the learning more than ourselves as well. And I definitely relate to that in those early years with the Irish Life Coach Institute. So yeah, that's a part of it. Moving into the next part of kind of, I've journeyed through purpose at this stage. So I've found that I want to help people. I want to help people. There's so many people I want to help. I can help people. That was really, I suppose, my rhetoric around that time, where, yeah, I knew that I could, yeah, there was something I could unlock in people. There was something that I could see people in all their pain and in all their joy, and I could give that back to them. And that's what a good coach can do. We don't tell them what to do, we're asking them and we're seeing them. And that was starting as I was flexing the muscles, the more I was doing it. And the feedback I was getting from clients was, whatever the work we did was really, really, really having deep impact. So that's a very addictive place, because you want more of that. You want to absolutely do more and more of that. So, but in the middle of all of that, my mother was handed a death sentence. Simple as. that Christmas, she went in with the suspected appendicitis and came away with stage 4 bowel cancer diagnosis. Taking a drink, not only just to take it in. And that was a really, really, really shit time. We went to meet the consultant 2 days before Christmas, and the results had all come back, and she had found out from her GP the night before, and so she knew walking in what her fate was, but we didn't. We had a fair idea. I think she had told me she was at home crying, I think, but we hadn't really overly told my father. Now, the surgeon was very jovial, older man. He's seen it all before, and he was really optimistic, and he kind of didn't overly express the stage 4 part. But then we found out that January that it was, and the surgeon told me that I should call my brother, who's in America working. He's home mostly, but he was away for business, and that she wouldn't survive the surgery, and she probably would die on the table. And as I hold my breath now, it was where it began of holding my breath. I went into brace position. I was like, this is on me. I'm here to help my mother. Help my mother at all costs. Cost my own health, everything that I knew, all my wellness bag of tricks that I had traveled with, when I was those years of kind of getting myself well. I really kind of forgot who I was in the middle of it. So it was either coaching or I was helping my mother. And there wasn't a whole lot going on in between. I think I had a few friends getting married that year of 2018 that I went to the weddings, but I hardly remember anything from the weddings because I was just so checking my phone. Was she okay? I was on this high alert that whole year that she was going to die. Even though she survived that surgery and she went on and showed her absolute determination. I reread some texts recently from September 2018, and she was starting on morphine then because her pain was really bad. And I remember texting a friend who had lost his sister in the months prior, and we were talking about morphine. And there's this, the old wives' tale of the minute you're on morphine and a pump, you're dead, you're a goner, because it's a slow euthanasia as such. But my mother went on to live for another 6 months after that. Her determination in those months was absolutely incredible. But I wasn't breathing. Everything I said there about mothers helping children, I can see why it happens. I can see where the care becomes that, just constantly caring, constantly responsible. And I have spoken about it before in other podcasts around this idea of being incorrectly sized. I thought I was the route to save everyone, and that I had to make myself really big. And that was something that I held from childhood, that I was there to rescue my mother on some level. That was my purpose. And at all costs, it didn't matter that loving her, caring for her, even when she was angry at me and used to give me absolute shit. She was a difficult patient because she was so frustrated. This woman had done yoga for 35 years. She'd ate her porridge, she ate her linseeds, drank her vinegar, before any of us knew any of these crazes. My mother was all over this shit. She had really looked after herself. She didn't deserve to get bowel cancer. So she had a very hurtful, angry, I would say, final months. And I was caring for her for all that. Now, by the end of it, she was very grateful. But fuck me, she really tested me at times. So, but I was just wanting to do the right thing all the time. And I pushed people away. My brother and I, there was a few run-ins and loggerheads. His father-in-law was also dying at the same time. They died a year apart in the same hospice room. Bizarrely, very bizarrely, or not. There's no. I don't believe in coincidences. That was meant to be. But there was, it was a time that really tested me and my family, and definitely my purpose. But now, again, in hindsight, I look back on where the real turning point in my purpose was. And that was, we had 5 weeks in hospice with my mother. And those 5 weeks were really, really precious, because I gave over the responsibility of caring for her over to nurses, and I could be her daughter again. And we got to have conversations again, even though she was in and out of consciousness for some of it. And also she cognitively wasn't always there because there was so much morphine in her system. But when she was very much there. And we had lovely conversations. But also when she was sleeping and I was there a lot, I got to spend a lot of time with the chaplain. And I was fascinated by the chaplain's work because I'd finished my coaching, I graduated and all of that the year before. And I was just like, him and I had conversations. He was like, well, you can choose your clients. I can't choose my clients. My clients don't want to be my clients. It's like, yeah, fuck it. And this whole idea of like how to accompany somebody on their deathbed. And it raised the whole legacy thing again for me. And again, I've told other versions of the story and they're all true and valid depending on the key theme or topic I'm talking about. Just before my mother got sick, my mother had given me a loan to do IVF on my own. So I'd had the breakup and the miscarriage. I had a burnout that summer. And I'm really messing up the linear lines of this, but you get the picture. And my mother had given me some money to do IVF, and then she got sick. So I paused that. The money was well spent. But after she died and after, those weeks in hospice, that was something that I would revisit again, because her legacy, like her funeral, and we were really blessed because her funeral was the year before COVID. So we had a massive funeral, and just the impact she had on so many people that weren't her children. That was a real eye opener of like, if you're a kind natured, authentic person, like you can really see people and really support people on their journeys. And my mother was definitely that person. And we were blessed to have been a witness to that and seeing the impact of her as a person. So her dying, my anticipatory grief, that bracing, because I was waiting for her to die the whole time, even though she was still alive, was grieving her while she was still there, was another part of my path and my perspective on what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be in my life. And some of the things I wanted to be totally different, that I don't want to do what my mother did. And also there's things that I would be honoured to be the same as my mother. And they're obviously personal things, but it's her life experiences and my life experiences and our family's life experiences, how that journeys with you into this discovery of your purpose. And I'll talk about it again on the other side of the fence around kind of the dark side of purpose, but we can have this kind of inherited expectation of ourselves because of the things our parents did. I'll mention that again in the second part. So as I move into, my mother has passed, and I was very fortunate. I took some unpaid leave, and it was a time where I was all over the place. I was, I think I've shared the story where I thought I was convinced I lost my really expensive sunglasses, like absolutely devastated, and they were on my head. Or, oh my God, I can't find my phone. It's in my hand. That's what grief does to you in those early days, that real, real raw grief that you don't know kind of your hand from your arse, like you're just all over the place. I laugh now, but it is such a raw emotional time, and the body is exceptionally smart on what it allows in. And I remember doing a talk for a school that September, and I cringe now when I think about that talk, because I was way more of a teacher than I was a coach. I was finger waggy. I just think, oh my God, car crash. I would never do that now, but I just probably went back to it a bit too soon. And it was, a time where I'm glad I didn't coach too many people in those early months, because I just wasn't able. Like, you really have to care for yourself in the middle of grief, and you can't necessarily care for others. So it's always about knowing the time. But I remember initially returning to work that time going, I'm here for a reason. I'm here to tell my story. I'm here to be authentic. I'm here to, yes, return to marketing with some regret and resentment at that stage. And yeah, I forgot to mention my mother and myself having a deep conversation around my career and job kind of on her deathbed. It was part of the time that she was very lucid. And she said to me, Norma, will you do me a favour? I'm begging you. Will you leave that job? You're really unhappy there. And I remember thinking, yeah, I will, mommy, I will. And then going back there initially was like, oh, fuck it. I'm here again. I don't know if I want to be here anymore. And a lot changed though, even when I went back, often case it might have been a manager or the role itself changed. And I'd pick myself up and say, I'm actually okay. It's not that bad. And sure, I have my coaching on the side because I was doing some coaching on the side, some after work, and I also started coaching internally. So the marketing became less and less important because to me, my purposeful work was helping others. So I'm now into early 2020 and I am looking at that idea of, will I become a mother? Will I be, will I go there? And I ended up having a really interesting systemic coaching session with an amazing coach who was my coach mentor. And she helped me decide, was that something I was going to explore? And we're into November 2019 now. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go and do this. I am going to buy my sperm and I am going to try it and see what happens. So the process at the time to buy sperm, you have to go for counselling. It's a bit like, it's mad. It's a bit like Tinder, but for babies. You're looking at baby photographs when you're buying sperm. The whole thing is weird, and for lots of friends that have since done it and they've tried it on their own, some successful, some are still in the process. So respecting where they're at with it. But it's just not normal. There's nothing normal about it, especially when you're on your own. It's so fucked up. But I made my choice. Denmark is the kind of main sperm donor bank for Ireland, and I chose my donor and did as much due diligence as you can do. A lot of it is energetics, and paid the money, was all set to go, was all set. I was going to be doing my injections that Christmas. Had this clarity of thinking going, yeah, that's it. I totally know this is what I want to do and I'm just going to go for it. And I remember going for a Reiki healing session with a woman that I've done a lot of meditating with, a beautiful woman, beautiful energy. And I came out of it that evening just I'm doing the right thing. This is all the right thing. And I went from her house home and I had a missed call from my dad's friend. And he had been in touch with my dad and he was a bit worried about my dad, that he didn't think my dad was very well, that he had flu, but he thought it was a bit more sinister than flu. And that he'd keep in touch, that he'd call again in the evening and he'd let me know. And he rang again, I think it was 11 o'clock, and he was leaving my dad. And he said, look, he hasn't gotten any worse, but his speech is quite slurred. And I think he might have had a minor stroke or some form of stroke, but it's not getting any worse. And we've just sent him to bed, but I really think you should come down and bring him to hospital. And I was like, fucked. And I remember it had been really hectic at work. And this is you're into December. My mother had died in the March. And I was like, fuck it. I'm just finished minding one of them. I'm not ready to be responsible again or mind anyone ever again, even though I was contemplating having a child, when I think back now. And I remember, I think I went to bed for an hour or two because I was like, if I drive home now, I'm going to crash. And then I'm going no good to anyone. I was exhausted. I remember my eyes were crossing, I think, even on the phone when he was saying, and no matter what fright I got, I was like, I actually just need to sleep. So I went to bed for an hour or two in the middle of the night, I drove down home to my dad, and he didn't recognise me. Like, he had deteriorated. And I remember thinking, well, I can't bring him to Limerick. I can't bring him to Limerick Regional Hospital because Limerick's such a fucking dump. And my mother had spent needless time on trolleys there, and it's just like an unwritten rule at our stage now, this side in our family. It's like you just don't bring anybody to the emergency room in Limerick, not unless a limb is falling off. And like a stroke is pretty much like critical timelines. Like, you should probably get them to the nearest A&E. Nope. Things are that shitty in Limerick that most people pile the people into the car and you drive to Galway. So I don't know how I did it, because he was just about able to walk, but got him dressed. And I was like, Daddy, you're really not well. We're going to hospital. And for the first time ever, he'd be a pretty strong-willed person. He was like, okay, so. And we were in the car, and it was really early in the morning. We left in darkness, and it was really kind of frosty, but not dangerous frosty. Just one of those really crisp days with kind of low-lying fog, but like the sun trying to get through, and the light was kind of come in, and Daddy was in and out of consciousness. Like, he was, but like in an okay way. I wasn't worried about him, and I was, but I wasn't, if you get me. And this, I can only say it was my mother or Holy Spirit or something came into the car. Something bigger than us. And this calmness washed over the car and was like, you're not becoming a mother. That's not your destiny. That's not your purpose. That's not your end game. You're letting it go now. It's time just to let that go. This is not your fate. And I was really calm about it. And I was able to drive to Galway, get my dad checked in to A&E, where they were convinced he didn't have a stroke. And I was like, no, he had a stroke. I definitely had a stroke. And I fought with the doctors and nurses who, for the first 24 hours, were like, no, he didn't have a stroke. He just had an instant. I was like, no, he had a stroke, to them, chewing their words 24 hours later. And they were like, yeah, you're right, he had a stroke. I was like, I fucking told you so. Anyway, it wasn't a ping pong game with medical, but I had spent a lot of time dealing with medics, to the point I'm that relative that nobody wants to meet in hospital, because I just know fucking too much. After being a carer for my mother, I just know all the medical terms, and years of watching ER, Grey's Anatomy, and more recently New Amsterdam. You'll find that I am, and my own experiences of 6 operations over a long number of years. I know a lot. I know too much. I don't want to know anymore, because that period of my life is over. I've done my time. Anyway, and all my spunkness. So yeah, that was just a really, really tough time. We had spent this is my third Christmas in a row in a hospital with a parent, 2 of which were dying Decembers. And I was fucked if I was going to spend another like Christmas in a hospital. So my father, he improved. I think he spent a good 7 days in hospital, and this, we're entering into our first Christmas without my mother. And initially, yeah, it was I think it was nearly a relief that I wasn't going ahead with the IVF. Could never see myself injecting myself. That was something, done a lot of stuff to my body, but I just couldn't ever envisage that. So it's funny, I never got to that part of IVF. And I didn't do anything with the sperm initially. I just got over that Christmas. And it was that January that I kind of found Joe Dispenza, where I'd heard about him, and I started doing Joe Dispenza meditations on the beach, and really stepping into that place of like, I can create the life I want now. I don't have to, be dependent on creating a child. But I was also equally very angry. I was angry with my dad. I was angry with my mother for dying. You name it, I had a lot of mixed emotions around those early part of 2020. And we all know what happened in March 2020. Boom, COVID hit. And on some level, you get, again, hindsight, great thing. But it was like, initially, it was a bit of excitement of, oh my God, I don't have to go into the office because this job is driving me fucking insane anyway. But also, yeah, I I couldn't go home to care for my dad because there was travel restrictions. Nobody could go anywhere. And he was fine in principle. But I also was so lonely. I was so lonely. And I got COVID very early on, very, very early on. Whether it was from whoever, the Italians that were here for the rugby, or my brother was initially skiing. And I spent my mother's first anniversary on my own, and I didn't touch humans for 6 weeks. I saw humans at a distance, but I had no human contact for 6 weeks. And 2 of those weeks I was hallucinating on in and out of consciousness. For those that are listening on the video, there's this picture here that is dancers in Donegal in the 60s doing Irish dancing. All those came alive when I had COVID. They all danced in the sitting room. Yeah, like mad hallucinations, fucking nuts. But yeah, really lonely time. My mother's first anniversary on her own was just awful. But after that, yeah, I think COVID was that realization of like, I'm never doing another pandemic on my own. I don't want to be on my own. I think that was the whole thing. But like, the more you focus on that, the more on your own you feel. But I was like, I just don't want to be single anymore. Like, okay, I'm not having a child, but I definitely want to meet someone. And how would that happen? You know, we're in COVID, we're locked in. There's no meeting people. There's definitely a few online liaisons, like chatting to men in those kind of months. But I was, again, the grief was still quite raw, I would say. And yeah, as we traveled through, again, we were talking about this, you know, purpose is at the heart of this whole, you know, piece. I was coaching as much as I can. So I finished out my advanced diploma in coaching. Actually, I graduated on my balcony because it was all from home. We had done the first few months of it, I had done in person. And then towards the end, yeah, I think the last 2 classes were online, which was really weird because I'd journeyed with these amazing people, amazing coaches, including Tara Rafter, navigation coach, Thomas McCormack, like some amazing coaches were in that group in our advanced diploma. And I really loved that course, that second course actually. So the coaching went a lot deeper and we were into neuroscience, and yeah, just Joe Dispenza would have been coming up a good bit. So there was all of that, kind of the start of like, oh, I can go much deeper with coaching. And that's the place I want to go in. If there's like a cold bucket of shit, I can dive right in. So my purpose was becoming, I can now be helpful to people, but not just help them get a job, but like help them discover who they are. This was, my coaching started to becoming like people coming to me like, who am I now? Who am I now after I've become a parent? Who am I now because of the loss of a parent? Who am I now? What do I want out of life? So all my themes were starting to become a lot deeper. And people were at that really like deep transformation. So it wasn't like just, here, help me do my CV and get a job. It was like, I want a meaningful job. I want a purposeful job. I want a value-based job that will meet my values. So like themes of belonging were starting to come up. So I was starting to, yeah, move into that much deeper work. Things I discovered. So I kind of returned back to some of the energy work. And travelled with a few healers in the intervening years, especially as much as you can when you could start seeing practitioners during COVID. That really supported me. So my acupuncture was important. And what happened next, again, was totally unforeseen. Like, I really didn't expect the next part of the story to happen. This is the newer part of the podcast. This is the parts that I haven't covered off in the early purpose kind of journey, and that was getting sick again. So my endometriosis had been dormant for years, and when I had the miscarriage at that time, 2017, I'd had the coil and that had been removed. So I wasn't on any hormonal treatment. Everything had laid dormant, right? So it's an endometriosis disease. So endometriosis is an inflammatory condition. So it like rises and falls depending on your inflammation markers. And everything had been, well, Like I had, now there's, I suppose, there's kind of a predetermined where endometriosis tends to get worse at the end of your kind of hormonal journey. So I knew there was something coming, and hysterectomy was always on the cards, but I really didn't think about it because in my mind I'm well, I am really well, and wellness suits me. And all the time I'm cared for my mother, and I'm cared for the little part of the journey that I cared for my dad. I really had been well. I didn't even have bad periods, or I'd kind of kept, everything was dormant is the best way to describe it. So for me, the summer of 2021, for it to rear its ugly head again was like, what the fuck? I've dealt with this. I'm a well person now. I care for myself. I'm well. I've done coaching. I've like this whole like shame piece nearly of like, what? My body has let me down again. Like angry with my body. Like I know what wellness is. I care for myself. How could I get this again? Really, as you can hear it in my tone. Um, just so unexpected, and it was set off by the vaccine. And I am not an anti-vaxxer. I absolutely believe in the power of vaccines. Would I get another one? Absolutely not. It just didn't suit me. And this is about individuality and knowing our bodies. But the first and second um, uh, vaccine just set off an absolute trigger of shit. But maybe COVID as well, right? It's never one thing. Um, and I do think it was my fate as well, right? I'm very fatalistic. That this was the course of my journey. But because I had, I think, COVID twice by then, 2 vaccines, and my body just went, what the fuck? And the endometriosis that had been dormant just raised its ugly head again, and I landed in surgery. I landed in 2 horrible trips into A&E. One of the A&E letters I got from Hollis Street was to my employer to tell them I was pregnant, which I fucking wasn't. Clearly, not only that was like the other extreme of barren womb is how unfortunately I used to describe it as. And I was like, I'd made my peace. I was starting to make my peace with not becoming a mother. And that was around the time, again, in that kind of purpose driven podcast that I did back then, in kind of February, March 2021, was, if I can't become a mother, well, then the one way of me giving back and having impact and having legacy was to work with others. And I was so clear, like, that my purposeful journey was so apparent at that stage. Well, I'm not becoming a mother now. I've laid it to bed. I've put it to bed now. I made that decision that morning, driving my dad to Galway. I'm not becoming a mother. So I'm going to just help people with my coaching instead. I'm going to help them in deep and meaningful ways with impactful work. This is where I want to be. I want to be working with groups and individuals. I was starting to do extra courses on team coaching at that stage. It was all there. Like, I was really continuing on my learning journey with coaching. So as I said, the unforeseen really, and like, I recorded that podcast around the March, and by that July I was pretty sick, and feeling rotten. Like, you'd kind of get a reprieve maybe for 1 week of the month, but 3 weeks out of the month I had horrific pain. And I was already sea swimming by then again. I was struggling to even sea swim. I was starting to swim with the women that I now swim with, which is 3 years ago. And I was kind of missing every other Saturday because I was just in bits. But anyway, I thankfully found a new GP, and she was like, I'm just going to refer you out of Hollis Street and into the Beacon Women's Centre. And there's an amazing man there who was special. She referred me to another surgeon. And I swear there was angels that day, because I was like, look, you need to give a really, really specific history that I am grade 4. Like, I've had 4 surgeries. I'm not having children, but I'm in a lot of pain. And I need you to really lash in. Like, I briefed the doctor, because I know the system. I know how this works. And the right nurse picked up my file, who was the nurse of my surgeon. And he brought me in August for a meeting. Then we did the first surgery, and he was like, yeah, you're fucked. And again, I'm laughing at these things. They're all like, that's my way of coping still. But it was fucking awful. Like it was hideous, because he was like, look, not only do you have a very aggressive form of endometriosis, but you have adenomyosis, which is a type of endometriosis in the womb. And a lot of people think that their pain comes from endometriosis, when a lot of at the time, that really severe, nasty form of endometriosis is actually adenomyosis. So that contractual, like pain within the womb, where like you feel you're giving birth every month, that's adenomyosis. And I had a pretty nasty grade of that. And at the time, I really didn't understand genetics, epigenetics, and everything I've subsequently done. And I was like, well, my mother had severe cancer, and actually they never really found out if her cancer had started in the bowel or the womb. Like, it was pretty much everywhere. So I was like, based on my family's history, like adenomyosis is a real precursor for uterine cancer. So I was like, he was like, look, I recommend hysterectomy, but it's really your choice. But you are going to need more surgery. And I remember being devastated. And it wasn't only a part of, okay, I'm definitely not becoming a mother. Here were the reasons I was devastated. Firstly, yes, I definitely wasn't going to be able to become a mother, even though I was 40. What age was I? 42, 43 at the time. So it was like that nail was definitely on the coffin. There was the biggest reason why my heart dropped when your man said you'll have to have a hysterectomy was, it's like, fuck it, I still can't leave that job. How can I not leave that job? Like, I really need to leave that job and go coaching. I want to start my own business. And I was like, another fucking year. I'm going to have to do another year. How could I give this job that I can't do another day of? How can I give it another year? And that was the really, really, really point of, like, I was so fucking angry. What else was I devastated about? Sure, what man would want me now? That was another, like, thinking that I have had to do a lot of work on. What man could love a woman with no womb? I'll be less of a woman. I already struggle around my confidence that I'm a woman enough for any man because I can't have children, or I don't have children. All the, again, BS bullshit belief systems that are not true that go on in your head. And but the biggest kicker was that I'm going to have to stay in this job for another year. And I don't know if I can do that. I had reached and again, it was no disservice to the company. It was where my heart was at. I just knew that I wanted to do deeper work, and I didn't want to be part of a shareholder matrix of just making money for, Wall Street. And I was gone beyond talking about leads. I wanted to talk about humans and their feelings and how important life is. And that, having walked with, my mother's dying days and those 5 weeks in hospice, there's way much more to life than fucking technology. And so many people can't see the wood from the trees, and they haven't experienced this. And do you know what life is about? You get really fucking soapboxy. Like, if you spent time with the dying, you're like, this is all bollocks. Again, humor. I'm laughing now at the ridiculousness of my thinking, but that was where I was at, at the time. Like, anger and grief is it's a motivator. It's a big mover of, if you want to fucking, hell had no fury over somebody who's lost somebody they love, because you're like, I'm going to fucking make the most out of my life now. Like, I need to make the most out of life, because I do not want to die young, having regrets. And a lot of it, the purpose stuff is like, you're doing it because you don't want to have regrets, because you see the regrets of people. And particularly if you've been, close to watching people die, that you're like, I'm gonna, but again, the Joe Dispenza is like, careful what you focus on, because if it's regret, you're going to get regret. Whereas my focus was, I'm going to be helpful. This whole idea of being helpful. And again, I'm moving into why I don't necessarily say that anymore. So that was the August, and I knew I was scheduled for my hysterectomy in the January. So I needed to get well from the surgery in August, build myself up, and be ready for this pretty big, life-changing surgery, where I knew there was a good chance that I was going to go into sudden menopause. So in the meantime, my father was getting his second knee operation done in December. So I think I went back to work for literally 6 weeks. I think it was the end of September, and I was there for October, November, and then I was gone again in the December because I was a carer for my dad who'd gotten his knee done. And then I remember COVID is still absolutely like racing through the country. It is, December 2022. It's December 2022. Yeah, my dates are all over the place. And so I was, very nervous and very much like, well, coaching has to go on hold now. And I didn't do a lot of coaching for a lot of those months in the run up from the surgery in the August to, I was probably doing a little bit of internal for the few weeks. People would always reach out to me to have conversations and stuff when I was internal, like clients, and I'd take them, but I don't think I was taking anything outside of that. It was just about managing. And it was around that time that my mentor coach was like, Norma, this is time. It's time to get yourself extra support. You can't do this on your own. So I had started Gestalt psychotherapy to support me as a resource. I was still swimming all the time, still doing the ice baths, like the Wim Hof tribe in those years after my mother died. Like I've a whole podcast dedicated to like just the cold and the tribe and the people that resource me. And you see me in the sea every day, so I'm not going to blab on about that because I think you've gotten that memo. But like it is, the year is that, like I had these other swim women who are amazing part of my life even now, kind of resourcing me and building me up before the surgery that January. And then, again, COVID, oh my God, when I think it was just a disaster. I think I had to get my third vaccine or else I wouldn't have been able to get the surgery. I think that was it. And that really fucking set things off. So even though the last surgery cleaned up the endometriosis, by the time I went into the surgery that January, I was in bits. I was the last surgery of the day, and the surgeon spent, I think, over 2 hours with me. Like, it's a keyhole standard hysterectomy, but mine wasn't a standard hysterectomy. My endometriosis was in every facet of crevice of my lower region, like it had not quite infiltrated into the bowel, but nearly, like it had done. And only the surgery had been the August before. So just that's how aggressive my disease was. It was more than a grade 4. If there's a grade 5, I think even he said, he was like, I hadn't seen a case like yours. And he said, I can't believe I only operated you a few months previously. It just took over like wildfire. It's like it knew it was getting the road. So he did an amazing job and got everything and took the womb, and he left the tiniest scrap of a little bit of an ovary, which some days I'm like, oh, I wish that was kind of gone. But anyway, initial relief, I would say. I woke up with just that sense of, okay, that's done. And I had kind of reframed it, did a lot of energy work in the run up, that saying goodbye to my womb, saying goodbye to her, that part of me was ready to go. She had served her purpose, but she needed to go and leave my body and leave room, like creative space for what was emerging next. And that's the way I now see it, that she had to go for me to give birth to something like my business, like the work I do now. And this was a creative space for me to, just to allow in. I've always had to exclude, like not becoming a mother and not being a partner, and not like, it's all the knots, not having a mother, not being a mother, not having a mother. It's all this, loss. Lots of losses is a theme. Loss and responsibility, big themes in my life. But all of a sudden I had this space. That was gone. Pain was gone. Now, in the first few weeks and months, you fucking tons of pain after hysterectomy. Like, you're on morphine. I was really lucky. I had lots of drugs. But it's a shit show. And the menopause, 10 days later, I think there's a video of me where I'd had a call with the Menopause Hub, who were amazing. And I probably just started HRT a little bit too soon. My body wasn't capable of like taking the information, transmitting it to my brain, because my whole body was in like flight or flight. But I had some amazing resources those months, as well as therapy. The minute I could, the therapist was on the 3rd floor. So as soon as I could climb 3 flights of stairs, I think it was maybe 8 weeks, I was back in therapy. And I was in therapy every week for nearly a year at that stage. And that really helped me. Like, that just really solidified my, I suppose, my ability to get back to myself, get back to what was important in my life, to love myself as I was now. Like, look at all those anger stuff, everything, the disappointment, the resentment, the shame, all those kit bag of fabulous emotions that we have as humans that we so often don't allow ourselves to feel. So yeah, those months in therapy were so rich and hard. Like, you go in there going, I just don't want to do this. But it really, really helped me journey with my purpose. And it was this time 2 years ago. So we are now in November 2022. And because of that systemic coaching session that was helping me to decide whether I was becoming a mother or not, had really traveled with me in those years. And I was really, really called to that training. So I started that training November 2022 with systemic coaching, the group. Like, phenomenal training. And that's when my purpose started to transform. So I went from wanting to be helpful with people to wanting to be useful. And there's a big energetic difference, because when we are useful to others, we are the right size. We're not trying to rescue or fix anyone, because nobody is broken. We see everyone as whole. And when we see everyone as whole, we allow for them to find their own resources, to find their own way. We don't tell them what to do. They absolutely thrive in that space, because we see them already in this powerful place. And it is a marginal difference to what I would have seen my purpose before as helping other one. It's like, I want to be useful. And as I've journeyed over kind of 2 years now with the systemic work and becoming a practitioner in May of this year, I now know the resources I have that can offer support. And one of them is my voice. I've been blessed, and as my energetic healers is like, you've lived a lot of lifetimes to have your voice. So I use it in this format, obviously through Instagram, podcasts, talks, meditation, my retreats, where I use my voice for good. I also use my voice for people to hear their own stories. And my voice has an ability to resonate with both men and women. I have an even toned voice. I'm very fortunate. So one of the ways I can be useful is my voice. Another way is my energy. And that can mean whatever you need it to mean, but it would be healing in its own way. And my healing modality is Reiki and Sakim, which is the next level up for Reiki that I did this time last year. I became a Sakim master. And yeah, so I am not the source. That's one thing as well. I think, again, right sizing, like, I'm not the reason why everything happens. I'm not the reason why the person finds the job or starts their business. I am a tiny, tiny lock that unlocks something in them for them to find it themselves. I am just bringing source through me for them to see themselves. So again, right sizing myself in the situation. When we are being helpful, we're in the wrong size. And we think, as I was telling you earlier, around being, trying to save my mother or rescue her at many times in her life, I was incorrectly sized, and that leads to burnout. So being very careful on the size of ourselves with our purpose. And then finally, my last kind of gift on how I'm useful to others is coaching. And my style of coaching is, I see you. I see all of you. I see you when you are at your best, even when you feel you're at your worst. Because I know from that point, there is only hope and growth. And I can see your determination. I can see your resilience. I can see all of you in my time with you. And that is something that is just strongly within me. I don't know. Yes, of course, it's a muscle that I've had to practice through my trainings, through my supervision, through my own therapy journey, but also that is probably one of my gifts, that I see people, I meet them where they're at. And although in my own life I can be spiritual and work with energies, that is not how I work with everyone, because that is not for everyone. So I'll meet people where they're at and what they need. And that's definitely been, I'm really blessed. That's like definitely one of my gifts. And it's something I now bring into my retreats. So it's like I'm combining all these gifts of that are interlinked with my purpose. So voice, energy, coaching, guiding, leading, but again, all gently using the energy that's not mine, comes from source, it comes from wherever, whatever you believe, universe, God, whatever your chosen thing is, or not. Like not everyone. I work with a lot of people who would class themselves as atheists or pagans or whatever, and it's really, I will meet you where you're at and what you need. It's way more about what you need than what I need, because outside of our sessions I'm attending to my own needs, so I can be with you to meet what you need. I'm making an absolute arse out of this, but anyway, you get what I'm saying. Things again that that has changed since the last podcast. I've got really familiar with my human design profile. I've interviewed the amazing Gus. If you go back a few sessions last year, she's been interviewed and she openly discusses my profile and how I view the world. And being a projector is very different from most of the rest of the population. I need lots of rest. So recognizing that if I'm not resting and taking time for myself, I'm no good to anyone and I get sick. It's a common thread amongst projectors. And yeah, if you're a projector, you become a natural coach because you just see things in a different light. So that's an interesting podcast to listen back on. Systemic coaching. It has just opened my world view in a whole new light. And it's not the end either. That's not my purpose. This is just the tools that I'm using now. I know that there is other things for me. I don't know what they are yet. And I will continue to journey with my purpose. But for now, I want to be useful to people, and not just individuals, but groups. I am so drawn to working with groups. And if you are a leader or someone who is open to something a little bit different, but really deeply impactful without them even knowing it, I'm your woman. I and I see it now in retreats and what I'm doing. I'm bringing together like amazing people. And I know I can do that. And I did it in corporate. I was doing constellations for like 80 people at a given time. I can hold big space. I'm from a big system. I have 70 first cousins. I'm used to holding a lot of energy. So that's really important. So yeah, becoming a systemic practitioner has just given me a new stance or a new view on life that I'm journeying with now. And it's how I identify myself as now, but that's going to change. I'll be continually evolving with my messaging and my purpose. I know I will be writing part of a book next year, and hopefully a book over the coming 12, 18 months as well. There's two pieces of the story that I've not told anywhere yet that you're going to get an exclusive on, that I've not shared. And this is part of my next phase of my purpose. The first one is a little bit nuts that I was so not expecting, and I might get upset. Just before I finished the Camino this year in May, my father, as a result of the stroke, had some genetic heart stuff, and we were asked as a family to go and get it checked. Me being me and being allergic to hospitals because of all the time I've spent in them in my own life and caring for people, I was like, sure, I'm grand. Until one of my spiritual guides was like, there's something up with your heart, Norma. You need to get your heart checked. And I was like, oh, God, it's grand. I'm grand. I'm grand. And then I met a new GP and I told her this story. I was like, look, every now and again, I get these palpitations. Every now and again, like I feel my heart skips a beat. And she was like, and my father has this, 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 and this. She's like, okay, you need a cardiologist. And I was like, okay. So, and you need an echocardiogram. And this one's amazing. And she's in Vincent's right beside you, blah, blah, blah. So I honestly, I backflipped into that hospital. I was like, I'm so healthy. I've never been so healthy. I'm so well. Like, I mean, like disco fever, like dancing into the hospital. And Vincent's private is pretty nice, right? Compared to some of the shit I've been in my time. And, but honestly, you walk into a hospital now, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so grateful. I'm so well. I'm so grateful. I'm so well. I'm so well. Overly identify with the wellness piece to the point that the echocardiogram was, she was scanning me and sore. Oh my God, like digging, like I thought, like breast check is sore, but this one is, yeah, it's pretty digging in. But anyway, lovely, lovely woman. And we had great chats. And I was telling her I'm off to the Camino now tomorrow. And she was like, okay. And just a moment there. And you're like, oh, fuck it. I was like, what is this? What is this now? And she was like, and what's that thing your dad has? And of course, I couldn't remember the acronym because it's all acronyms. But anyway, she was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, okay. And she got all quiet. I was like, fuck it, anyway. So between the jigs and the reels, anyway, I was told to go up and meet the cardiologist on to the next appointment. I'd finished my echocardiogram, wished her well. She was lovely, similar age to myself, and just cool out. And on I went up to the cardiologist, who had written on a piece of paper a post-it note that had PDA, something, or atrium, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, I picked up the piece of paper and I said, I take it that PDA doesn't mean public displays of affection. And she laughed and she said, no. And I was in giddy form, very giddy. It was probably the first time I wasn't going to be working for 10 days since I started the business. And I was going off to the Camino the following day. And she said, did you know you have a murmur? And I was like, no, I did not know I have a murmur. And she said, yeah, 1% of the population have murmurs. You're born with this open valve. Everyone's born with it. And 99% of the people closes in the first few months of life. And the rest, the 1% of the population, it remains open. And it's mostly innocuous. And it only impacts you later in life. But you are more I can't say the word susceptible. Can't say the word. To heart disease, and yeah, viral heart diseases, etc., etc. My jaw dropped. I was like, for fuck's sake! This whole idea of being sick or having a diagnosis, I'm so allergic, you know. So I kind of laughed. And I was like, am I okay to walk 175 kilometers from tomorrow? She was like, absolutely. I'm sure your heart has been tested a lot in your life and you've been fine. And I was like, yeah, I'm absolutely fine. I've held my breath for long periods of time. I have put my heart in ice, cold water, you name it. I have lashed my heart here, there, and everywhere in the last years. And it's been through its own little sadness as well. Little sadness, big sadness in the last few years. So I've really, tested my heart. So I can feel it in my chest as I speak, and it's going, yeah, you have. You've really tested me. So she said, look, the science says now at the age that you're at that it is time to, you can get this closed. And that would be, that's what I would prescribe. And I'm going to send you to another consultant who that's his specialty. He closes these PDAs. And I'll send you his details and you can get an appointment with him. And I was like, grand. And I remember thinking, shit, this is genetic. This impacts my whole family, as in my wider family, my 70 first cousins. I'm like, shit, I'm going to have to tell them. And I was really torn. I was like, oh, well, somebody told me, oh, well, it's their responsibility to check their heart health. It's not on you. And I was like, yeah, but I know this thing that's in our family and I should tell people because, that's on me if I don't. So, I texted some of the cousins and I just said, yeah, look, I have this heart thing. It's not serious, but it is kind of needs to be checked, but it could be okay, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, it turns out father has one, my aunt has one on both sides. I have it on both sides. It's way more common in women than it is in men. And by the time I met the consultant, a good few months later, I was very chill about it. Like I forgot about it on the Camino. I was like, my heart is absolutely fine. I can keep going. There's nothing I should be concerned about. And when I met the surgeon, he is cool out. He's like, look, I do 57 pound babies all year. I think you'll be fine. So I have that coming up. And for those of you that know me well, one of my expressions that I have shared a good bit about is, and this is the coincidence because there is no such thing as coincidences, leave a little room in your heart for the unexpected. Leave a little room in your heart for the unexpected. Well, fuck me, I never knew it was going to be in my heart. I never knew it was going to be right inside my heart was my unexpected. So I have a theory, coherence. I'm really big into heart coherence and how coherence, we are in resonance with people when we are coherent. I believe in coherent breathing, all of the above. And so I can't wait for life when it's done. It is a small, minor operation. Not even it's not an operation. Well, there is a minor, tiny cut. I might have a plaster, but it's all done. It's not even. There's no general anesthetic or anything. But yeah, it is an unexpected in my heart that I've been going around my whole life without knowing. I've had 6 major surgeries, one in public, the rest in private, and nobody has ever found this fucking heart murmur, which is kind of scary that nobody has picked up on this because it's audible from the outside. Like if you have a stethoscope, you can hear my heart. So that's kind of frightening. But anyway, so I'm getting that done very soon. For those of you that follow me on Instagram, I am going to tell this story a bit more publicly, I think, because if anything, it just will raise the profile. And PDAs are not the most serious thing that you can have in your heart. In fact, it's way down the list. But everyone our age, middle, women in particular, have more heart attacks than men, and nobody talks about it. So I will be raising awareness in terms of your heart health as a woman, a middle-aged woman who has been through a lot of health issues, but is really well and energetically strong. So watch this heart baby, because who knows what's going to happen afterwards. Wink, wink. This heart is ready for love. Well, in fairness, as I said, I'm happily single. Of course, I'd love to meet someone, but it's not in the ether of plans just yet. So that is my heart update. The second update, which I do think will come in terms of purpose, which is really big as well, and about being useful to people and guiding people through the most challenging of times. I am about to train as a funeral celebrant. Yes, you heard correctly, a funeral celebrant. I'll drop the tone to match the experience because I know how deeply moving a time it can be and is, and I know because I've been there, to guide people through the toughest time of their life. So I am training to become a funeral celebrant, and will be a qualified funeral celebrant before the year is out. I don't know how much I'm going to use it. I don't know. I'm just going to leave a little room in my heart for the unexpected with it. Maybe it's to be useful to people I know who will have ceremonies outside of churches, and they need that somebody to walk with them. So I'll probably be working with funeral directors and directly with families. I think part of the training is I'm going to be working to understand, to help people in hospice who are dying, who are making plans for their death, and what they would need to accompany them. So I think after my mother died, and again that time in hospice, I considered death doulas after working, spending a lot of time with the chaplain. But again, that's not something that's accessible in terms of training, but I don't think I'm ready for that either. Everyone has said to me that I've told around the funeral celebrants spaces like, oh, you'd be great at weddings too. And I feel there's a lot of that around. And maybe I will do weddings in time, I don't know. But there's also about me standing over a wedding when I'm single myself. I don't know, there's something around that I'll have to get curious about. Whereas I've walked with a lot of loss in my life, and I had a lot of loss in my life before I was 5 and I didn't even know it. Having been in my mother's womb when my grandmother died, when I was born, my mother losing 3 babies, and particularly the death of Julie when I was 5.5. Her anniversary is this month. And yeah, just there was others, like there was the loss of my uncle and my cousin. There was a lot of death in my family up until the age of 5. And so I think I'm very familiar with loss. And some people have it really hard, and they, in the tradition of the Catholic Church and Christian burials, there's rituals around that, and then there isn't a lot of rituals and support for people outside of the church. So I'd like to be useful to people going through, those challenging times. And as I said, I'm not quite sure if I'm going to practice. It'll be on top of my coaching and all the other work I do. So I'll just wait and see what the calling is, and if that's meant to be a part of, maybe if I only do a few a year or whatever, or I'm there for other members of our wider family. Who knows? But I know Irish people, we have a huge ritual based around death. And the woman I'm training with, she's an anthropologist, and that is something, the study, I looked at anthropology when I studied language and cultural studies, and it's a whole field that I'm absolutely fascinated by, but also can go deep with it because of my training. So that's my latest news, all under the umbrella of purpose. But it just goes to show, right, that we're never done. We're never done with purpose. Like, purpose is a journey, and it is not a destination, nor should it be, because we're always evolving. We're always changing as people. So allow yourself to, what is the next step? What's the next step in your purpose? It's not definitive, and it can change. And doing a course or enjoying a course you love is brilliant, but giving yourself the time to integrate it, that's a really big lesson for me. Time to integrate it, and then time to teach and act and do, So there's such a cycle that goes, and Gestalt in itself, and the psychotherapy that I do, and I'm definitely looking to apply more of the Gestalt within the coaching. And I also have done some trainings on that this year. Gestalt coaching is a complete circle, and within that circle we start again all the time. And that's the way, and that's why I love the spiral. I use the spiral a lot on my Instagram, because we're constantly spiraling, and we're spiraling this time of year. We're going inward, we're going into the dark, before we can move out to the light again. And we're constantly spiraling through these waves, and allowing ourselves to surrender and act, and that duality between the two. Surrendering, move, integration between the spaces. Like, in between the line of that spiral is spaces. And we need those spaces for calm, for reflection. And when everything is always chaos, like, how can you be who you are without the calm? So seeking out, attending meditation, attending retreats, finding a way. It has been toots a moosh. It has been a big podcast. I told you it would be a long one, but that is a particularly long one. So for that, I salute you if you have gotten to the end, because it's probably over 2 courses and 2 sittings. So thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to the updated version of Purpose is a Journey. And I hope it's been really useful. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of Beyond the Norm. I am so appreciative of your time here. I know nobody has 2 hours to listen to a podcast, and this was a big, meaty one. So thank you so much for listening in. If you have found me to be useful and a resource for you in any way, if anything that I've said resonated with you, please do get in touch. I offer one-off 90-minute sessions, or 3 sessions, or 6, or whatever you need. As I said on my podcast earlier, I will meet you where you're at and whatever you need. I also do retreats, and I do lots of talks and presentations, and I'm a facilitator. So if any of those services strike you that you might need for you or your company or your teams, just holler Norma O'Kelly@gmail.com. You can follow me at Norma O'Kelly, Systemic Coach on Instagram, and Norma O'Kelly on LinkedIn. I also am on Facebook, probably use it the least of them all, but you'll find me on those as well. So it has been brilliant just to be with you all in this format. I always love to hear from you. So if you have gotten to the end of this podcast, please let me know if any of the themes resonated with you and how you found them. And just go gently as ever. Please rate, review, and share. Share it as wide as you can. I really appreciate. Thank you so much.